Many people ask on both sides of the aisle what has happened to America. It's a question that plagues me too. I have long thought that we are experiencing a crisis of meaning, and this is something that Andrew Klavan highlighted in his recent book, How to Save the West. So today I'm going to devote about 20 minutes towards explaining why we should believe in God. And I'm actually going to provide 3 arguments that are not rooted at all in Scripture, but just in our everyday lives. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey friends, welcome to Timeless, the show where I talk about timeless, eternal subjects. I would like to make a correction at the front here of the show. I said in the introduction that it was Andrew Klavan who wrote the book, How to Save the West. And then during that little musical interlude, I looked at the book and I realized, oops, it's his son, Spencer Klavan. They both are such geniuses and really great philosophical leaders here in America. So I'm sorry for getting them confused, but I would like to correct that it is indeed Spencer Klavan. So as you know, today I'm going to provide 3 arguments as to why all of us should believe in God. And this is rooted in this crisis of meaning that I feel that so many of us in America are experiencing and have been experiencing over the past few decades with the decline of religion. Right now, it seems that we are facing a spiritual problem for which there is no political solution, where people are so desperately trying to find meaning in their lives. And I think that they are misplacing that meaning. They are looking for unhealthy ways to fulfill it. Those of you who have listened to me for a long time know that I am a big fan of G.K. Chesterton. I actually have his book right here, Orthodoxy, alongside Spencer Klavan's book, How to Save the West, here on my set. And one quote of his always sticks out to me, and it is something that I contemplate almost on a daily basis. He says that when people stop believing in God, it's not that they believe in nothing, it's that they believe in anything. I wish so many people, especially my contemporaries, could hear and internalize this quote. We live during a time where actually a lot of people have a religion. A lot of people have a God, but they are false religions and false gods. You know, the first commandment out of the 10 commandments says, "Thou shalt not have no gods before me." And I think that is such a wise statement, because God there in the 10 commandments is identifying that if you don't believe in God and his moral revelations, you're going to seek your meaning and spirituality elsewhere. And we see that a lot nowadays in a variety of arenas, most specifically wokeism. Look at what happened during the summer of 2020 when some estimate as many as 25 million Americans went out into the street and protested on behalf of Black Lives Matter and so-called racial justice. I looked at all these people on the television and I thought, they are so desperately trying to find meaning. They are trying to feel like they belong to something that is greater than themselves. I feel that that's why so many people undertake woke causes, not just BLM activism, but climate change, fighting the patriarchy, transphobia, etc. It's that they want to feel like they are making a mark on the world. And that is usually what religion has fulfilled for people, but now it is being fulfilled, as I am arguing, in other forms of religion. Those of you know that I attended Harvard, and I saw this also. There's sort of an accomplishment-oriented form of religion that permeates in those rarefied environments that, frankly, I think at one time in my life I succumbed to, where we have the false god of thinking that if we get a fancy degree or land a prestigious job, then we are going to find meaning and fulfillment in life. And I discovered, I think when I was around 20 years old, that as hard as I worked to get into that elite university, and I'm certainly so grateful and happy that I went there, it didn't give me that sense of meaning and fulfillment that I had thought. I thought if I could just get the Harvard acceptance letter, then I would have the Midas touch. Everything in my life would turn to gold. All of my problems would be solved. And I realized that that was sort of a false god. Another example is it's something I talk about on my show with Dennis Prager, Dennis and Julie. There are a lot of people my age who I think embrace counterculture as a false god. It's fascinating to see people, especially women, walking down the streets and they have and they have all these piercings, and it's very in vogue nowadays for people my age to have stick and poke tattoos. And also there's this sort of in vogue idea that you can look grungy. You know, a lot of women grow out their armpit hair, they don't shave their legs, and to them it is a form of defiance. And that too has sort of become an element of religion, that the more that you are embracing the counterculture and being so-called defiant, the more meaning that you can find. And a final example that I'll give that is especially common among my contemporaries is Instagram and social media. You wouldn't believe how much time people my age spend thinking about captions, thinking about what photos they should post. They will take literally hundreds of photos with different poses in order to get that exact one to post on Instagram. The opinion of others is something that many people nowadays worship. So this is all to say everyone has a God. Everyone has a religion. We are fundamentally, on the one hand, this is pessimistic, we're fundamentally followers, but also in an optimistic sense, we are fundamentally soulful creatures who seek something beyond ourselves, who need our spiritual curiosity quenched. So today I'm going to provide the argument of why a monotheistic God, a Judeo-Christian God, is the best way to quench that spirituality. And I'm going to provide 3 arguments for why that God exists. The final thing that I'll say in this introduction before I finally dive into these 3 arguments is that I have a profound amount of respect for those who are religious, and specifically Christians. But if I had to respectfully give one piece of advice to those who are trying to encourage young people to consider religion, it's that you have to meet people where they are. I remember when I was young, some Christians would tell me, Jesus will save your soul, God will heal you. And to someone who grew up secular and someone who was not really familiar with a lot of scriptural or religious arguments, that was a bit of a bombardment for me. It's just like if you're trying to get someone's palate used to spicy food. You're not going to feed them, Sean, what is the thing in sushi restaurants? Is it wasabi? Thank you. You can tell I don't eat spicy food. You're not going to give them a dose of wasabi immediately. That's going to overwhelm their palate. That's the same thing with religiosity. You need to meet people where they are. So that is what I am trying to do now. And I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to a book that so influenced me and I think did such a good job of providing religious arguments without shoving it down my throat. And that is the Rational Bible series by my dear, dear friend and co-host Dennis Prager. I had a bit of spiritual religious curiosity when I was 20 years old, and I had the good fortune of stumbling upon his book, which was the first book that opened me up to religion. And I'll never forget in the introduction he wrote, "I'm not trying to make you a Jew. I'm not trying to make you a Christian. I'm trying to make you an ethical monotheist, someone who understands that our moral basis of society comes from the wisdom and the moral revelations that are in the Bible." And Dennis said, I just want to impart that wisdom to you. And it was such an amazing way of giving me an introduction to religion because it didn't feel like a bombardment. It felt like something that was palatable and understandable. And I originally read the book just to really become a more informed citizen, but then by accident, Dennis made me a believer. So I'm going to go on to this first argument, again, that God exists. This is not a scriptural or religious argument. It is just something that we can observe in our everyday life. Spencer Klavan wrote in his book, How to Save the West, that one of the interesting things about life is that everything around us, everything visible and material changes. People grow older. A cliff erodes. Plants die. Structures decay. People change. People's health can change. People's character can change. You go outside and there's a sunny day and all of a sudden a hurricane can come through. It really is something that I think we all are sort of subconsciously aware of, but consciously we forget. Additionally, much of life, in addition to changing, is also subjective. People see colors differently from others. People hear sounds differently from one another. People process certain events differently. Some people have blessed lives and view themselves as cursed. Some people have horrible lives and view themselves as blessed. So much of our lives is variable, subjective, and changing. Again, Spencer Klaveman highlighted that. And this can give the impression that everything in life is a free-for-all, including spirituality, that the universe is just random chaos. But amid all of this change and subjectivity, there is one thing, and I get the chills as I say it, there is one thing that never, ever, ever changes, and that is the truth. Spencer Klaveman writes, you can call a piece of wood food, and you can convince yourself and everyone around you that that piece of wood is something digestible. But if you eat it, your digestive tract is going to reject it. It is not going to be convinced that it is food. In other words, the truth is concrete. The truth wins in that situation. You can convince yourself all day long that you can step into the shower and you won't get wet. But if you are under running water, you are always, always going to get wet. You can sell someone 2 pairs of 2 apples, and they can tell you that you gave them 3 instead of 4. But in every universe, at any time, constantly on earth, you gave them 4 apples. You can go to court and be convicted of murdering someone when you didn't murder someone, and you can go to jail for murdering someone when you didn't. And you may not be given the justice that you deserved. But you know what? In every universe, at every time on earth, it is true that you did not murder that person. That is real. And so to me, sort of the steady hand of truth amid change, amid subjectivity, amid chaos, is sort of an allegory for God, the unchanging, eternal God amid sort of the chaos of humanity. The fact that truth is constant shows that there is always, always an invisible, eternal, intelligible standard and order about us. And that's God. God is truth. Truth is God. With all of the chaos, there's a through line. And just like truth can be subverted, God can be subverted, but it is always, always there. That's argument number 1. This standard of truth that always exists is always there and unchanging. That's an allegory for the presence of God. The second argument, I guess, is a little bit more, a little less philosophical. I have long observed throughout my life that there are certain feelings that we have throughout the day or throughout our lives that sort of, I know this sounds corny, but bring out your soul or make you feel connected to a little piece of your heart or something inside of you that you can't quite describe. You know, when people experience deja vu, that's one example of such a feeling. When you have a gut feeling, that is sort of your intuition and your soul tapping you and signaling its presence. I remember I was in a parking lot once and it was a beautiful day. I had a great lunch with my friend and I just had this awful sinking feeling in my chest that something was wrong. And it turned out that there was a creepy homeless person following me and I didn't realize it until a few minutes later, but I had that gut feeling that shows you this soul, this intuition that you have. You know, your conscience is another thing. Dennis, my dear friend, argues that your conscience is not enough. You need to also be able to observe moral values, and I certainly do agree with that. But the fact that you do have a conscience, the fact that you can sort of innately have a gut feeling if something rubs you the wrong way or something is right or wrong, that's another sort of element of your soul peeking through. But one of the examples I want to give now is music. Music brings out, I think, more than anything else, this deep, eternal soul that we have that transcends our physical body. Beethoven has this amazing quote. He said, "The vibrations on the air are the breath of God speaking to man's soul. Music is the language of God. We musicians are as close to God as man can be. We hear his voice, we read his lips, we give birth to the children of God who sing his praise." I had long heard throughout my life that music is sort of the language of God, as Beethoven just said, and it never really resonated with me. because I always thought that you had to listen to sort of old, magnificent classical music in order to feel that soulful feeling. But then I sort of realized that even the, I'm laughing because it's kind of delinquent music, even the kind of delinquent music that people like me and my contemporaries listen to, that it pales in comparison to the beauty of classical music. We listen to Kanye, we listen to Dua Lipa, we listen to Beyonce. Even that kind of music does bring out a soulful feeling. When I listen to certain songs, I think about people I have never met. Sometimes I think about my grandparents or my great-grandparents. Certain songs evoke that emotion in me. Other songs I listen to, I think about getting married and having children. It's an amazing thing that music can sort of change your mindset and bring out emotions in you that you didn't even realize that you had or that you can't even put into words. And even rap music, as weird as it sounds that people my age listen to, it can make you feel a certain kind of motivation or grandiosity or pride or a sense of I can do this that no words can make you feel. It just again speaks to the power of music, and everyone has it. Everyone feels it to some certain extent when they listen to music. And it shows, I think the greatest proof for it is that no one in this world is without music. Even in the most rural parts of this world, even in places where you don't have a stereo or don't have a radio or don't have an iPod, people create music. People tap, their thighs, or they bang on pots and pans. Every human has that need to listen to music, have some sort of rhythm, and I do believe that that brings out your soul. I'll just read this one quick quote from Orthodoxy, which I think really describes art and music and how it does bring out the inner presence of God in you. He writes, "All that we call art and ecstasy only means that for one awful instant we remember what we forgot." It's true. We remember certain things, certain emotions, we become excited about life again when we listen to music. And finally, relatedly, my third argument, again, not rooted in scripture, just in everyday life about the presence of God. When people ask, where's the proof of God? My answer is look around you. I didn't realize this until really recently, and it was actually during an interview I did with Robert Florzak, who is this great artist. He created the Neverland Ranch logo, Michael Jackson's logo. His work is in the private collections of AT&T Corporation offices, Mel Gibson. I mean, he is an amazing artist, art historian. His book on Errol Flynn, I happen to use as my little thing to write on here. And there's a clip that I want to play for you when I interviewed him, and he was talking about the beauty of light on a painting. And I am telling you, it transformed the way, not just that I view art, but I view the world. Let's listen to this clip.
The other thing is this, it's almost ethereal light coming from here. It's not just white paint. It's the masterful blend of knowing what to put around it and where to put it in the painting that gives it this almost like inner glow.
And even that fire in the bottom right, you just, when you just said, look at that ethereal light, I just had this moment where I went, oh my gosh, it's a painting.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it sounds a bit kooky to say, but I think sometimes when we're looking at something like this, we forget that it's a painting because it looks so real.
Right.
And that's when you realize how magnificent it is when you look at that and you go, wait a minute, you're right.
Right.
That's not real. I'm not looking at an actual window with real light. That's a painting. So during this episode, those of you who watched, I asked Robert to provide 5 examples of classical art, paintings that everyone should know. And throughout the episode, I sort of have my expertise hat on, and I'm asking him to give the historical context of the painting and the painter and talk about forms and techniques. And one of the things that he taught me in that episode is you don't need to be an expert to look at a painting or to appreciate a piece of music. Just as corny as it sounds, sort of let it hit you and reach your soul. And so in that specific clip, he was talking about, as you heard, the light, the way that the artist painted light on that painting. And it was in that moment that I realized for an artist to create and paint light in such a realistic and beautiful way, they are seeing the world in a way that I'm not seeing it. In other words, they are paying attention to detail. They are paying attention to things that I don't even think about, such as light, the way that sun hits trees, or, just sort of everyday life in a way that I sort of gloss over. So that day after that interview, I was driving back to my apartment, and I got off, my regular freeway exit. And usually when I'm sitting there waiting, to go down the street that I live on, I'm like, oh gosh, this off freeway ramp is so ugly. The freeway is right above us, there's litter on the ground. I just sometimes would think about how ugly the sight was. And I'm sitting there in my car at the red light, and I look across and I see this tree on the opposite on-ramp where people were going onto the freeway. And it was about maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the way that the sunlight was hitting the tree and the little wind that was breezing by made the leaves sort of flutter. And it was so beautiful. I know I sound so corny, and I know some people may be like, did she smoke the reefer before this? No, the whole point of this is that life is so cool. You don't need substances to make you think life is cool. This is an example. If you just look up and pay attention, it can be as if you're on substances because life is so beautiful. I'm sitting there and looking at this tree, and the way that the leaves were moving, it looked like these gold shimmering objects. And I went, oh my gosh. Look at the world around us. There is proof of God. There is proof of beauty everywhere. And it was Robert Florzak who highlighted the light on the paint, who made me look at light in the world, that made me realize this. I know it sounds corny again and weird, but look at all the insects that are on the ground, like the variety of insects, or the variety of fish in the sea, or the variety of flowers and trees around us. I know people would say, oh, well, there's evolutionary nature purposes for that. Flowers need to exist so that bees can take nectar from them, or the ocean needs to exist to sustain humanity. That may be true, but why are there so many different varieties of beautiful fish? Why are there so many different varieties of gorgeous plants? I feel like God is looking down on us and thinks, you don't see the proof of me? Everywhere there is variety and beauty. It is just magnificent. And if you look up and pay attention and appreciate it, again, the proof is everywhere. Well, that's my corny but hopefully enlightening episode for you. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, 3 arguments for God that are just rooted in everyday life and not in Scripture, though I have to say, as someone who once didn't want to look at Scripture and now has, the wisdom there is just unparalleled. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you soon, and take care.